What is happening, y'all? Cowboy here, and welcome to my review of the first Berserker, Khazan. This review is based off of roughly 50 hours played. At this point, I have finished the game. I'm currently working through New Game Plus. I managed to get the full or the hidden ending, if you will, got a majority of the trophies. And so we're just going to be going through my whole experience. In terms of spoilers, obviously no story spoilers. You are going to see some advanced combat techniques. And the second half of the video, we're going to jump over to the hub when we talk about world design. So you'll see some stuff there, including some later game weapons. But either way, let's jump in because I got a lot to talk about. And I'm going to be honest right up front. This is just absolute peak. This is, without question, one of the best Souls-likes I have played in a very long time. And I do not think I would be exaggerating to say that it is like a fusion of Nioh and Sekiro together, which I think is why I've come to love this game so much. And to expand on that a little bit, you know, when I think of Nioh, the first thing that comes up is the gear optimization and putting your build together. And that is very much a thing in this game, but it's actually been streamlined quite a bit compared to how it was in Nioh. And we'll talk about that more when we get to the hub. And when I think about Sekiro, I think about kind of the dance of the combat, like being able to weave your attacks in between your deflects and your Makiri counters, and, you know, maintaining constant aggression on the enemy while also making sure you're playing defensively and you're countering the enemy when it calls for it. And that is the exact same vibe I got playing this. We have a bunch of different defensive options, and I think at first it feels almost overwhelming, you know, because we have our brink guard, which is like a perfectly timed guard. We have our brink dodge, which is a perfectly timed dodge. We have reflection, which is basically a parry, and then we have burst counter, which is used against key abilities, kind of similar to a Makiri counter from Sekiro. And at first, I definitely think I felt a bit overwhelmed. I was like, oh, you know, I'm just gonna focus on brink guarding. I'm not gonna worry about all this other stuff. And the more I played and the more I really leaned into the various abilities, the more that the game began to reward me in just in terms of like my raw damage output. Like being able to chain various abilities together, kind of how you just saw right there, to build up stagger chains on the enemy and take them down. That was a core loop of the gameplay, at least it was with the greatsword. And you know, it was really fun. It was really, really fun. Being able to be like, okay, I'm going to counter this. I'm going to counter this. I'm going to do a setup parry into a reflection. Then I'm going to get up my aura. From the aura, I have the extra amount of stagger that's going to come in. I'm going to be able to use that, get off a heavy attack, knock them out of the heavy attack. I'm going to go for a different special. That's going to finish off a stamina. I'm going to, you know, hit my brutal attack from the front. That's going to knock them on down. Then I'll chain into another heavy attack. And figuring out, you know, basically how I wanted to weave those attacks together was a core part of the gameplay experience, and it was just super, super satisfying. So talking more about the overall feel of the gameplay and the overall flow. Like I said, the game does a very good job of kind of replicating that dance from Sekiro. And what I mean by this is, like, I could, for example, I could just play extremely defensively and, you know, focus on brink guarding. I know I'm missing them all right now, but I could basically just focus on getting those perfect blocks, and out of those perfect blocks I'll actually do some stamina damage. So out of them I could go into a quick 1-2, or I could go into the 1-2 and then go into a charge attack for some damage, or I could do, you know, the 1-2 and then do the dodge into the 3 chain, or I could do the 1-2 and then do a dodge into a heavy attack. And so there's just a lot of options that the game presents you with in terms of combat flexibility, and especially as you progress towards the later part of the game where all of your various abilities open up. I think that's what really makes it shine, is it doesn't feel like you're ever having to, you know, take a turn with an opponent. Like, I do damage, now you do damage. It feels like, you know, I need to be aware of my options and when I need to play defensively. But at the same time, if I am, you know, utilizing the right moves, I can also go pure Unga Bunga and then just weave in a counter attack to stop certain moves. I have certain abilities that will allow me to shrug off damage, like the one you just saw there. If I time this right, for example, this one ability, if I time that and take a hit while that ability is active, it actually boosts the damage a ton. If I'm using this, I'm getting a little aura on the ground on top of my charge attacks. And with weaker enemies, that aura can actually cause stagger potential. And so there's a lot going on with this, with the game here, where, you know, it really rewards you for digging into your abilities and spending the time to figure out how various things weave together. And I ended up spending a lot of time in the training room to figure out certain combos, which we'll talk about that more later. But honestly, it's just one of the most satisfying combat experiences I've had in a really long time. And if you've followed the channel for a while, you know that I love Souls-likes. I love things like Nioh and Sekiro and Lies of P and Lords of the Fallen. I've played all these games. And the combat in this one, I mean, it just called to me, man. It felt like the perfect blend. They hit the secret sauce here. And, you know, not for nothing, I also think this is the closest I've ever come to actually feeling like guts in a game with a greatsword. Is, I mean, when you play right with greatsword, you are just slaughtering through minions. And then you get these monstrous bosses and you're looking for opportunities to stagger them and then pump huge amounts of damage. And it was just satisfying. Like there's no other word. Satisfying is the single greatest way to describe how the combat feels in this game when it eventually clicks. And, you know, not to downplay other Souls games. I love plenty of Souls games, but I think this might top Nioh for me in terms of the skill expression I get. Now, to be fair, I haven't done a lot with the dual blades or spear. I'm saving those for other playthroughs, but I am confident in saying this is the most fun I've ever had with a greatsword. Like, bar none, there has never been a game where I have felt this potent in terms of the capacity to use my greatsword to slaughter hordes of enemies. And that's a feeling I'm not going to forget anytime soon. Talking a little bit about the overall world design of the game. So the world is hub-based, very similar to Nioh in the sense that so it's mission-based, I should say, and then we have a hub. So a little bit of similarities to like Souls, but also Nioh. But the idea is we can go on missions from this hub. We can freely replay missions. We can start missions part of the way through. So like if you wanted to farm a particular boss, for example, compared to having to replay the entirety of the mission, you can just zone into that mission at the boss and just straight fight the boss. You don't need to replay through the entire thing. And that's something that is, I'm just an immense fan of it, you know? Like, I don't know why that concept hasn't crossed my mind before with these games, but it's like if you look at Nioh and you're like, what if we could just start at the end of the mission to fight the boss and we didn't have to fight everything? And that's what we have here. And it's like, holy shit, that's a really fucking good idea. Oh, and did I mention that we can just, at any of these two, we can just freely leave. Like, let's say you're at the boss and you're like, I'm struggling with this boss. Once we get past the demo, you open up the crevice, which is our hub. We're going to hop over there now and look at some hub stuff. So you'll see some NPCs, you know, spoiler warning here. There's going to be NPCs, obviously. I'm not going to talk about anybody. But from the hub, we just go here and then we just pick the mission. Like, oh yeah, Yeti's domain. Cool. I can fight that boss. Or Storm Pass. I can go here. I can refight Blade Phantom. And being able to just jump in and do that is so freaking cool to me. We also have region info up there, which shows us if we missed any of the jars or any of the soul crystals. The jars are kind of like Kodama's in Nioh. There is an NPC, and as we find jars, he gives us access to these goofy looking jar helms that actually get some pretty crazy stat boosts later on, so they're worth finding. And then the soul cores give us passive upgrades that we can upgrade here at our main hub. Now, continuing along with world design, we're going to talk about the hub a little bit. So we're able to just freely do stuff over there. You can talk to the various NPCs that are in the hub. If we go over here to Defrona, we can jump on over into the training grounds, which I love. Every time we have a game like this, I'm like, man, I wish we had a training grounds. Guess what? We got one, baby. We got a training ground finally, and you can sit here and you can weave your combos and figure out how much damage you're doing. I do wish we had a sheet that like showed how much damage was being pumped out with combos. That would be pretty nice. And the one big glaring flare here is there's no way for me to just maximize my spirit. So when I came in here to test various abilities, I had to manually beat on the thing for like a minute to build my stamina up. But in terms of training settings, we can pick various opponents to fight against. We can make them defensive, neutral, or offensive. We can change whether or not they recover. We have 2 different areas we could go to. So there are quite a few options here in the training grounds. I do hope they expanded. I'd love to see, you know, just a damage tracker, kind of what we have in Monster Hunter here. And I also want a way to max out my spirit. But a training area is something that I always want in Souls games. I'm always trying to optimize my damage flow, figure out what I'm going to hit the hardest with. And it just feels so good to finally have it in one. Like, I cannot express how happy I am about that. Hopping over to the human part of the hub, this is where we'll see various NPCs and talking about a couple of core things we have. So we have a Dumic here as a merchant. We get him pretty early. We can just buy various things off of him. We can also sell things to him. To be honest, gold's never going to be a concern. I'm over 2 million at this point. I was never struggling for gold once. Over here we have Oksana, and she actually moves locations a little bit, but we can break down gear. And like, so if I break down this one piece, I'm getting 6,418 lacrima from it. So I can use her to break down gear and turn it into experience. I can also use her to change the attributes on gear. And on top of that, attributes in particular are super simplified compared to Neo. So like taking a look at this, or here's a good one. You know, critical, stamina recovery rate, stamina damage increase, and rage. What the hell is critical and enraged? Press help. Critical applies an effect when my health's below 30%, and raged applies it when my stamina is 50% or lower. That's it. That's simple. On top of that, if I want to change stuff, it just costs lacrima, so all three are going to cost 30,000, but I don't want any of these perks. Change. Damage multiplier, I'll keep that. Let's change these two. Charged attack, that's all I use. Let's do that. Enemy critical. Do I like that one? Oh, the enemy's below 30% health. Yeah, okay, so an extra 71 damage when I'm trying to kill him. That sounds great. And that's all I had to do. Just like that. That's how simple it is to modify the affixes on our gear. And then augment actually allows us to level stuff up. So like I take this, which is, you know, I can go there. All right. Now my main greatsword is up there. Now it's up at 148. Cool. And so we're able to just change the affixes on our gear. We can break it down into lacrima. Alternatively, we can sacrifice that gear to level up our weapons or our gear. And maybe you don't want to do that. Well, the blacksmith has you covered. On top of being able to craft a variety of basic stuff, in addition to all of the various consumables the game has in the game, yes, we have the ability to respec. Yes, we can craft that shit as much as we want. We have sets. All the various sets from the bosses and whatnot, you're going to be able to find those. Like the Ashen Wolf, this is one of the first sets we find. We can craft that. Where's the I don't want to go through too many of them. I'll scroll back up. You didn't see that part. It's all right. You don't know who those bosses are anyway. But anyway, we can freely craft boss sets. We can craft micro sets like this. I really like the Brinkguard Spirit Accumulation. So I can use the 2 points of the Defector set, and then I can combine that with a different full set bonus so that I have that Spirit Accumulation while we have that set bonus. There's also something similar to a Yasakani in this game where it's going to reduce the set crafting requirements. So especially in New Game Plus, you can push things even further and mix and match multiple sets. You need materials to craft? Don't worry, homie has you covered. We can just go here and include set items or exclude them and just dismantle all. Like, dude, I'm not, I know I sound like I'm the world's biggest glazer right now. Oh, did I mention New Game Plus? We get full transmog. You just pick, hey bro, what kind of greatsword flavor do you want today? Like, this game has everything I want ever in a Souls game. I have full transmog. I have easy gear modification. I have bosses that I can freely refight. I can just jump to any mission that I want. There's even shit to track if I've missed stuff, bro. Like, I know it just keeps getting better and better and better. Like, we go over here. I go, oh, so phantoms, these are like cool little passive homies that you put on. They don't do anything besides the passive effect. They're not going to like assist you, but you get, you know, I have an extra 15% if I'm hitting it from the front. And then I get spirit on perfect counters and on brutal attacks, which just allows me to do more abilities. If I go to Khazan's memories, I can go over here and I can see like, oh, you know, what did I miss in this level? And if something is grayed out, it means, oh, hey, there's an Imperial Soldier's Journal. I don't have that. I don't know what it was. That would be grayed out. And because of that system, I actually realized, hey, I have diary parts 2, 3, and 4. I'm missing the first diary part. I need that to get the hidden ending. And I went back here and looked and saw a spot that was missing and was like, holy shit, it's on that level. I need to go back to that level. I need to find this thing. Like, there's so much. Inventory. Let me talk about this, dude. Check out these lanterns. So at the base game, we have a regular lantern, right? Then we get one that's going to reveal hidden enemies. There's also one that will help guide you to treasure chests. There's a lantern that will prevent undead from reviving. There's a lantern that's going to surround and reveal hidden roads. And while I was playing, I was like, man, this is greedy, but I wish we just had like a super lantern that did all that shit. I started New Game Plus, and what did we get? The completed lantern. It does all that stuff. Like, I cannot... dude, it's like I said, it's just fucking peak, man. Like every time I wanted something in this game, every time I was like, you know, I really wish I really wish we had a training area. Shortly after that, the training area unlocked. Man, I really wish I had a super lantern that did everything. Guess what, buddy? Welcome to New Game Plus. You got it. I really wish there was transmog. Hey, you made it to New Game Plus. Check this out. Free transmog on everything you've ever found. Like, dude, it just goes on and on and on. But everything they have put into the world design and the gameplay of this game is just exactly what I want in a Souls game. Talking about environments, which is usually what I talk about when it comes to world design. Overall, I do like the environments. I think I wish there were more levels with verticality, which I know is weird to say as we're climbing up a bunch of ladders and doing a mountain right now, but a lot of the later levels felt like they were kind of in towns, very indoors, like weaving through caverns or weaving through various halls. And I would have liked more open levels. There are a lot of them, but I really like the designs on levels like this more than I liked the town or the more dungeony type designs. Which on that note, everything is paced. There's no like pure open world like how you would expect in say, you know, Elden Ring. The levels are designed for you to progress them a certain way, which with the ability to freely travel to a level and go to any part of it that you want. One of the things is when I was trying to find soul crystals, I would actually restart levels, but I would play them in reverse. And so, you know, I'm going through sneaking up on the enemies that were trying to ambush me, and then, you know, seeing if I could find soul crystals, just approaching the level from a different perspective, just literally playing it in reverse, which was pretty cool. But yeah, overall, I think the world design was pretty nice. I mean, the environments do look really good. I just didn't like the dungeon and the city ones as much as I did the open world areas, but you know, everyone's going to have their own preferences. In terms of the story, I actually like the story a lot. The story is very much a revenge story. It is very dark. I think one of the big things is it actually made me feel for a lot of the villains. And, you know, no spoilers, obviously, but there was like one villain towards the end where I was like, man, and this was a side quest, by the way. And I'm like, man, this guy is just like a huge piece of shit. Like, where is he at? I need to kill this guy. And then I killed him. And then I absorbed his soul. And when you absorb the soul, you get like backstory. And I like got his backstory and what happened to him. And I'm like, oh, okay, yep, never mind. I was not familiar with you, sir. I understand now. Like big Thanos wasn't wrong type moments happening. So actually, I like the story. Now, it's not going to win any awards or anything, obviously. You know, it is a revenge story. But, you know, not much in terms of happy endings that are happening with the revenge story. I got to swap this back. Okay, now I have it on. Sometimes when you do these missions... Now, I think it's because I've replayed through this level already. But usually it, like, changes the equipped weapon that you have. Oh, another thing, you probably saw it briefly there, but like this weapon, you can see I get something called Thanatos Wave and Limit Break Apex. So when it comes to gear sets can empower certain abilities. So I had one that empowered that slash. This particular set will empower, you know, that's like my normal charge. And then I have a additional level that I get with this particular sword, where I just do like Mega Unga Bunga charge. But so the various sets, as opposed to like Neo, where it was like, oh, this is gonna, you know, increase your damage by 20%. The sets usually have empowerments to your various abilities, which is something that I found really, really cool as well. I know this is very off topic and we're not talking about story anymore, but it felt relevant at this point in the discussion for some reason. In terms of, well, to close out the story part though, I ended up liking the story. And like I said, there was just, I think the biggest thing is there were a lot of times where I was like, man, like, you know, screw this guy. I hate this guy, or he's bad, kill him. And then like getting to see that enemy's perspective was a really nice change of pace, you know, because usually bad guys are bad guys. Like imagine like, you know, we defeat Pontiff and then you had like a cutscene that explained why Pontiff was the way he was and did what he did. That was a really nice touch, and it's something that I deeply appreciated with this game. Talking about the graphics, I think this is going to be the big decisive point for a lot of people, because it's obviously like animated stylized graphics. Personally, I love this design. I just, you know, I vibe with how it looks. I'm a big anime fan, so obviously the cell shade thing I've been a big fan of for a long time. I enjoyed it with the various Dragon Ball games and the anime games that have done it before, but I realize it's not going to be for everyone. And I think that's going to be a big decision point for a lot of people, is whether they are on board with the graphics and how things look. But overall, I think the game looks beautiful. I think the graphics play well into the environmental design, and I didn't have any particular issues with it. In terms of audio, the overall audio for the game is amazing. I will say boss themes, there weren't any boss themes that really stood out like as epic as some of the you know, the Latin choir type stuff we get in FromSoft was. However, the voice acting for the game is phenomenal. You know, both Khazan as well as Blade Phantom. You know, Khazan is Ben Starr, same guy that did Clive in Final Fantasy 16. Blade Phantom is actually the guy who did Margit in Elden Ring, and both of them do a phenomenal job on the voice acting. Like the anger, the emotion, it is all there, which is something that I really liked. And the sounds in combat, oh, like that, dude, that deflect sound, like you can just hear how juicy the combat sounds. And I think this is one of the things that I like the most is when it comes to a game like this, especially when I'm using a greatsword, like, oh, it sounds hefty. And that's what I want. You know, when I'm using a giant slab of metal like this, I want to hear the impact of that. I want to hear it smashing through enemies. And they did a fantastic job with it. The parries sound crisp. There's even a little like shoo when you get like your perfect dodge. Sound effects are just right where they needed to be. Length and price, I think this one's a no-brainer. You know, I'm looking at 50 hours for my first playthrough. I want to play through with the other weapons. We're obviously doing New Game Plus right now. I think for your average Souls player, I think this is an easy 100-hour game. No questions asked. So I don't think there's any issue right there. I think length to price ratio is, you're getting a high value out of this for sure. Bugs and performance. Overall, the game was actually pretty solid. I had a couple of very minor bugs I encountered and also very minor performance issues. Now, keep in mind, I am playing on PC with a 4090 and 13900 KS, so I do have a very high-end rig, and as such, I didn't really expect to have any performance issues, but there was one enemy in particular that would basically create clones of himself, and at one point, the clones were doing a special attack, and he was doing a special attack, and I had like a graphical glitch out for like a split second. And I you know, like I said, very isolated incident. And other encounters where I fought this guy, that same problem didn't happen. But like the one time it happened, I was like, whoa, what's going on? You know, is the game killing itself right now? What's happening with my graphics? It's also important to note I don't have the day one patch at the moment. This is the review patch, so it doesn't have like the final changes they are trying to push out. So, you know, maybe that stuff will get cleaned up, but regardless, wanted to call it out. Oh yeah, it looks good. In terms of the bugs I encountered were very few and far in between. When I first got into New Game Plus, I went and talked to the blacksmith, and all of his text suddenly changed over to Korean for like half a second. Like, he still spoke in English, but he was like, hey, how are you doing? But all the text was in Korean, and I was like, what the fuck? And then I exited the conversation and talked to him again, and it was immediately back to English. So I'm not sure what the deal was with that. Like I said, very odd, very isolated incident, but that's probably one of the only things that came to mind. Well, that's the most recent. There was one other time where I was like on this weird ledge and I dropped and I basically got caught between like a wall and an archway, and I couldn't move. No matter what I did, the game wasn't accepting any inputs. So at that point, when that, God, this guy's fucking shield died. At that point, I had to just, you know, do this. I just quit out. I did return to title screen. And when you do return to title screen, it's just going to bring you right back to the last rest point that you had. It's not going to do spot saves, but if you do that, so, you know, same thing, we're loading right back in, and it'll bring me right back to that rest spot where I was. So very, very minor in terms of bugs and performance issues. You know, didn't really run into anything, like I didn't have lost Amrita or gear not working or anything like that. I did have one thing where I'm, and this might just be me, but I was convinced that a boss's loot table was bugged. There was, so this is a little bit of like a story, but there was a particular boss I was fighting, had a set that I really liked, had a cool special ability that it gave me access to, had a bunch of stuff around brink guards. I was big into brink guarding at the time, and I wanted this set. And I farmed this boss, I believe 19 times, and bro would not drop his pants or his boots, but he was consistently dropping pants and boots from a different set. And so I'm convinced there was something messed up, and bro's loot table was coded to give me someone else's pants and boots instead of his. I don't know. This is hard to confirm. It might have just been the world's worst RNG, but I mean, by the time I was done farming this guy, I had God, I don't know. I had like 10 of his swords, a bunch of his helms, his armor, his gloves. I could not find the pants or the boots. And then and just to make things worse, that set, which is actually like one of my favorite sets, is one of the only sets in the game that I haven't found the damn recipe for. I found recipes for nearly every other set except for that one. It bothers me to no end because I'm getting sets for every other boss, and I'm like, man, I can't wait till I get the corrupted set. That's the one I want. And then I never found it. I don't know where it's at. It deeply, deeply bothers me. But you know, it's hard to say. Is that a bug or is that just bad RNG? So anyway, overall though, I mean, closing thoughts, I kind of already mentioned it, but you know, game is peak, dude. This is, I had so much fun playing this and being able to just like, I think the big thing for me here is, as I mentioned, the combat here is just so satisfying. And as you can see, New Game Plus is not a joke. You know, like, I mean, I am kitted out. Most of my gear here is around level 140 plus. In terms of stats, I mean, I have 4,600 health, 2,000 stamina, a shit ton of damage. My guy is decked out. And despite that, if I'm trying to just be like, yeah, I don't need to fight this boss, I can do whatever I want, he will punish me. And that's something that I like. You know, the challenge definitely prevailed all the way through. And actually talking about that a little bit, because I know even on stream, I was saying that it felt like this was a little bit different from the demo that we had access to back in October. And I will say, I think the difficulty and the challenge of the game is fine here. You know, after getting through it, there were quite a few bosses where trying to get through the boss took me like upwards of an hour. And then at the same time, there were fights where I just, you know, I felt like I had it. I had the secret sauce. And so I think the game did a really good job of fine-tuning the difficulty here. Like, I think that they basically made the intro a little bit easier just because they wanted people to be able to get access to the hub and start, you know, get the ability to replay through various missions and whatnot. But, you know, if you're like, oh, I played the demo and I think it was too easy, like, nah, you'll have the challenge. And for those that don't like the challenge, the game does actually have an easy mode you can select after the first boss. On top of that, we have access to the Spirit of Advocacies that you can summon in, which is just like an NPC that you can summon who's going to assist you. So the game has a lot of things which you can utilize to make the difficulty a little bit easier if that's what you're looking for. And if you're looking for a challenge, don't worry, you'll have it. Especially if you're not using your Spirit of Advocacies, which is, you know, there's actually a trophy for beating the whole game without using them. But yeah, that is going to wrap things up here for me. Like I said, this is probably the most fun I've had with a Souls game in a really long time. Easily, I think the last time I had this much fun with combat was, like I said, either Neo 2 or Sekiro, because the combat here is just, it's good. It's really good. Bro's running. Yeah, we're going to kill this boss and then we're going to wrap up the video. Nope. Oh, I missed that. Ooh, bro almost killed me right there. It's actually my first time fighting him in New Game Plus. Two, three. Not big enough. Bunga bunga. Down he goes. But either way, we are going to wrap things up there. Yeah, there's not much else to be said. I love this game. Honestly, my biggest decision right now is whether I want to do a walkthrough or get good guides, but I had an absolute blast with this. I can't wait to jump back in and play through it. You know, whether it's going to be New Game Plus or a Flesh playthrough with a different weapon. I loved every second of this.